I think most of the time, us adults tell kids what we think they need to hear instead of listening to what they're asking for. And I said that right up front. And to me, that's one of the most important things, because so often children don't know how to articulate what they are needing. And we will just bowl them over. And what do we say? It's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. Do we really believe that if we tell a kid it's going to be okay, that it's going to be okay? No, what it does is it makes us feel like we've done something, like, oh, I've done something. But that leaves the child empty and lonely and not heard. And they will go away often feeling really sad because whatever was really worrying them or traumatizing them was brushed aside by somebody saying it's going to be okay, don't worry. You can't stop worrying if someone tells you don't worry. And so basically what we have to do is validate those feelings and listen to them. I'll give you a really good example of how I experienced that personally. I was very lucky a number of years ago. I got invited to the Congo, Uganda, Burundi, and Rwanda to work with former child soldiers and kids in refugee camps. And basically what I went there to do was to help them express what they were feeling through creativity. I was in for a big shock because, boy, they taught me more than I would ever taught them. But we went into a refugee camp one day, and I was with the United Nations contingency. And as we got in, there were kids just swarmed us. Kids just want skin. They want something to hold on to. And there were kids surrounding us, and they were jumping up and down and saying hello, and they want to hold your hand. So you're walking with 10 kids on each hand. So I'm walking around with all these kids, and I'm loving it. One little boy put his finger through my belt loop, and he would not let go. One of the workers came with a rolled up newspaper, and he started swatting all the kids to tell them to go away and leave us alone. So they all sort of ran off, except this one little boy. And the worker was trying to pull his finger out of the belt loop to make him go away. And I said, no, it's okay. Let him stay. It's okay. It's fine. So this little boy walked around with me most of the day. I mean, he was hanging on my belt loop, and I was drawing on the chalkboard, and he was standing looking out at the kids. And later on in the afternoon, he tugs at my sleeve, and through a translator and a little bit of broken French, a little bit of English, and the boy wanted to ask me a question. Now, all of these kids were orphans. Their parents apparently had been killed in Rwanda. And the boy wanted to ask me a question. I said yes. So I kneeled down to be on eye level with him. That's something I suggest to parents, especially with younger kids. When you are talking to kids seriously about something, or if you want to connect, get down on their level, because there's nothing worse than somebody looming over you and trying to ask you a really soft and intimate question about something when you're being towered over. And it's really interesting how the playing field levels in terms of connection when you do go down to the child's level. So I went down to this little boy's level, and I looked at him and I said to him, what's the question? And he said, can you help me find my mommy? And one of the workers came in and said, I told you, we're going to find all your mommies one day. You must just be patient. And I went, whoa. And I looked at this little boy, and I took a breath, and I said, where do you think your mommy is? He goes, oh, she died. She's in heaven. I said, oh, okay. I said, you know what? When I say my prayers tonight, because my dad's in heaven too, I'm going to ask him to please pass on a message to your mom to tell her that you love her and that you miss her and you will never forget her. Okay? And he looks at me, he goes, thank you, mister, thank you so much. And he's hugging my leg, and he's just so excited. And he ran off to play football, play soccer with the other kids with the rolled up paper bags, waved at me every few minutes just to know that we had the connection. But I learned something really important that day, that little boy, he didn't need to be told lies. He needed validation of where he was, and that was all he needed. He needed somebody to be there with him where he was, and listening to what he was asking for made all the difference. And that was a huge lesson. And I share that a lot with parents, because sometimes we get so involved in the world that we don't take that breather to be able to be in the moment with our kids. Don't say, I understand what you're going through. Don't say, I know how you feel. Don't say, I went through exactly the same thing. And certainly don't say, it's no big deal. Because again, what we're doing is not validating what that child is feeling. So what we do say is, you know what, I've experienced something similar. Or can I share something that you may understand? Or I don't know how you feel, but I have a pretty good idea. And one of the things that I ask parents to do when they are sometimes in a tough situation is relay a story from when you were that age that shows that you are in tune with what they are experiencing, instead of trying to fix it for them. Let them know that, wow, that person does know how I feel. I had an experience once which sort of pulled it all together for me. I was volunteering at the hospital in Austin. That's what I do when I want to feel good. It's very interesting. People say, why would you want to go to a hospital where there are terminally ill children? I wouldn't want to go near there. Well, hospitals and orphanages are my happy place, because it makes me realize so often that I'm a very lucky and blessed person. But I happened to be sitting with a young guy named Victor one day. I think Victor was around 14 years old, and we were sitting and having chat about life. And he turns around to me and he says to me, what's going to happen when I die? And I was about to answer him when his mother jumped off the chair, ran over to the bed and said, you are not going to die. We have spent $375,000 to keep you alive. You will not die. And he's like, well. So, he shrugs his shoulders and I shrug my shoulders. Well, his mom left the room about 10 minutes later. And I said to him, Victor, we're all going to die. I'm going to die. You're going to die one day. He said, I know, I'm not stupid. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, so what do you think happens when you die? I said, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that we go to a really nice place. Some people call it heaven, some people call it nirvana. I don't know, but I believe I'm going to go somewhere. He goes, yeah, me too. I said, okay, cool. He said, but how do you know where to go when you get there? I said, what do you mean? He goes, do they give you a map or something? I said, that's a really good question. He said, well, I'm really nervous because, there's millions of people up there. How would I know where to go? I said, hang on a minute. And something clicked in my brain to be able to come up with this concept. But I said, I'll tell you what. I took out my journal and I drew a picture of my grandfather. My grandfather was a great guy and a lovely man, and he probably still is somewhere, just a wonderful man. And when he passed away, there was, obviously a huge gap in our lives. But I said to him, here's a picture of my grandfather, and I gave him the picture. And I said, if you pass away from this disease, if you do, when you get to heaven, ask for my grandfather. His name is Ted. He'll get you checked in. He'll get you a good room. He is a great guy. And he takes the picture of my grandfather and he goes, thanks. I'll tell him you said hi when I see him. I said, yeah, please do. So he took that picture and he stuck it on his little bulletin board next to his bed. And every day when I walked in there, I teased him about something and he would say, I'm going to tell your grandpa when I see him, okay? And I'm like, no, don't tell him. He's a ghost. He can come and spook me. And he said, oh, now I'm really going to tell him. Well, unfortunately, he passed away a number of months later, and his parents asked me to deliver the eulogy at the church. And I did so. And I decided I was going to do a stand-up comedy routine instead of just doing a regular eulogy, because that's what he would have wanted. He liked my jokes. He thought I was silly, and I decided to do that. So I went along to the church, and unfortunately for me, it was an open casket ceremony. Now, where I come from in South Africa, they don't have viewing, and especially of a child. So I didn't look in the coffin. I walked around the side. I scooted around, went and sat in the pew. And the priest came up and he delivered the sermon. And then he asked me if I would come and deliver the eulogy. And I got up And I started talking about Victor and all the crazy things he did. Like the one time he took his urine sample container and he poured apple juice into it. And when the nurse came along, she said, "Give me your urine sample." And he picked it up and he opened it. And then he drank it and he said, "Well, I better pass it through again." And of course, the nurse is like, "Oh my goodness, are you insane? Are you mad?" And he thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. And so I'm saying this, and everybody's laughing in the church, and they are just remembering him with just such humor, and it was great. And what happened was, I didn't look at the coffin. I didn't want to remember that little boy lying in the coffin, so I didn't even look there. So on the way back, I'm walking by, and I turned, and lo and behold, I looked in the coffin. And there he was, lying in there with his hands on his chest. He was bald from the chemotherapy. He had a black tuxedo on with a red bow tie. In his coffin were all his toys from when he was a little boy. His baseball kit, his cards, his Legos, flowers, that thing was packed. And he was lying there, and in his hand, he was holding that picture of my grandfather. And his mom said to me, "You know what? You did more for my child than $375,000. And I thought about that afterwards, and I thought I didn't really do anything for that little boy except validate what he was feeling and to listen to his questions instead of me telling him what I thought he needed to hear, which his mother kept on telling him he wasn't going to die. He knew he was. And to be able to hear him made me realize that sometimes we can very simply use little tools to connect with kids in the most difficult of situations. And that was a huge lesson for me in terms of trying to find ways to connect with kids. And sometimes traditional ways don't happen, especially when our egos get involved. And so that's how I sort of started working with connections and figuring out ways to do it. There are three things that I really like to leave with parents or caregivers of children or anybody who's with children. And the first thing is make space for that child to be able to connect with you. Put the phone down. That the best gift you can ever give a child in this world is time without a phone. Kids would say that they will remember that more than they remember a trip to Disneyland or a gift. So make that space. Number two, listen to what kids are asking for instead of telling them what you think they need to hear. Because sometimes just that ear will help them change what they need to go through to be able to navigate something that's tough. And number three, validate their feelings. Listen and validate and even repeat back to them, saying, "Oh, I hear that you are really sad." And by acknowledging their feelings and validating them, that is letting the child know that they're being heard and that they're being respected. Because when a child feels respected, they open up and they will share the information and tough things that they are going through.